There are 298 prisoners on death row in the state of Florida. This is part 11 of the series. John Reese, 58 years old, 30 years on death row. Reese was found guilty of killing Charlene Austin and given the death penalty. He was acquainted with Austin through Jackie Greer, a close friend of Austin who served as his occasional girlfriend. Because of her close friendship with Greer, Reese had already expressed envy of Austin. Charlene was discovered essayed and dead in her bedroom on January 28, 1992. Greer and a neighbor visited her house because they were worried about not being able to contact her. She was lying under a sheet in the bedroom when they entered through an unlocked door. Reese's handprint was visible on the waterbed in Austin's bedroom, according to the authorities. When he was questioned by the police, he admitted to the crime. He claimed to have entered Austin's house illegally and waited for her to return. He also said that he was afraid and hid in the closet when Austin finally got home 4 hours later. When she fell asleep on the couch, he emerged from the closet. Reese claimed that he panicked when Austin began to move. Then, after dragging her into the bedroom, he essayed her before strangling her with an electrical cord. Ronnie Farrell, 59 years old, 30 years on death row. A witness stated that on 22nd of April 1991, the victim, Gino Mayhew, was selling crack cocaine outside of his car when Kenneth Hartley and 2 co-defendants, Ronnie Farrell and Sylvester Johnson, approached him. The witness observed Hartley pull Mayhew into the driver's seat while holding a gun to his head. Farrell slid into the front passenger seat, and Hartley took the seat in the rear, behind Mayhew. Johnson followed the car, a Chevrolet Blazer, out of the parking lot in a pickup. Police discovered Mayhew slumped in the driver's seat on April 23, 1991, suffering from 5 gunshot wounds, 1 to the forehead, 3 to the back of his head, and 1 to the shoulder. Alvin Morton, 51 years old, 29 years on death row. Alvin Morton, Bobby Garner, and Tim Kaine broke into the home of the victims, John Bowers and his mother, Madeline Weiser, sometime between late in the evening on January 26 and early in the morning on January 27. Although they went with the defendant, Chris Walker and Mike Rodkey did not go inside the house. One of the other men carried a huge serrated knife while Morton carried a shotgun. The 3 men entered the living room in search of a takeaway object. From another area of the home, Bowers and Weiser entered the room. Morton commanded them to lie down. At this moment, Bowers begged for his life while also pledging to give them whatever they wanted. Bowers would contact the police, Morton retorted. Morton said, "This is what they all say." Then he shot Bowers in the back of the neck to kill him, despite Bowers' insistence that he would not contact the police. The gun jammed as Morton tried to shoot Weiser. Then Morton attempted to stab Weiser, but the weapon was unable to cut through the victim. Gardner then shoved the knife in by stepping on it. In the end, Weiser was fatally stabbed 8 times in the back of the neck, severing her spinal cord. Before the 3 men left the house, one of Bowers' pinky fingers was severed, according to Garner or Morton, as they later demonstrated to a body named Jeff Madden. On the basis of a tip, the police and firefighters headed to the victim's home. They discovered the victims and learned that mattresses had been set on fire. Morton was discovered by the cops in his home's attic. Under Gardner's mother's trail, they discovered the murderous instruments. In the end, Morton admitted to shooting Bauer and helping to make the first cut to Weiser. William Thomas, 63 years old, 29 years on death row. Rachel Thomas was killed and William Thomas was found guilty and given the death penalty. William Thomas intended to abduct and murder his wife in order to avoid paying his half of their expected divorce settlement. Thomas and Douglas Shroud went to Rachel's house on September 12, 1991, with the intention of abducting her. After beating Rachel, Thomas bound her. Rachel tried to escape, but Thomas held her back inside the home by her hair. After loading Rachel into her car or truck, Thomas drove away. She vanished without a trace. In May 1993, Thomas was eventually charged with killing his wife. He had made a number of accusations regarding Rachel Thomas's abduction, but once his mother was killed, Thomas came under intense scrutiny. Authorities thought that Thomas killed his mother to stop her from accusing him of killing Rachel Thomas. Leonardo Franchi, 53 years old, 30 years on death row. Pablo San Martin, 56 years old, 30 years on death row. Ricardo Gonzalez, 53 years old, 29 years on death row. Leonardo Franchi robbed the Kislak National Bank in North Miami, Florida, along with co-defendants Ricardo Gonzalez, Pablo San Martin, and two other accomplices on January 3, 1992. A cash box was stolen from one of the drive-thru tellers during the heist, which also resulted in the shooting and death of a security guard. Gonzalez confessed to the crime after being stopped by police on January 18, 1992, and he also blamed Franchi for the robbery. San Martin admitted to the robbery as well. On January 18th, when the police questioned Franchi, he also confessed to the crime. Johnny Hoskins, 60 years old, 29 years on death row. Police were called to Dorothy Berger's home on October 18, 1992. Although she was not at home, neighbors had seen that her door was open and that both her air conditioners and television were on. Even though there were no obvious traces of forced entry, a shoe print could be seen in the floor dust, and some items were out of place. Berger's vehicle had also vanished. A witness had observed Johnny Hoskins, a neighbor of Berger's, driving a vehicle resembling Berger's the previous evening. Hoskins came at his parents' place in Georgia and requested to borrow a shovel on the same day that police were summoned to Berger's residence in Brevard County. About 20 minutes later, he went back to his parents' home. On October 19th, Hoskins was pulled over in Georgia for a traffic infraction. It was later discovered that the victim was the owner of the vehicle. The victim's body was eventually located in a grave when authorities discovered plants in the trunk of the vehicle along with blood. Her mouth was muffled and her hands were tied behind her back. The victim was assayed according to post-mortem examinations, and DNA evidence found on the victim and on the victim's bed may have been the work of Hoskins. Berger suffered many blows to the head and severe physical wounds, but strangling was the cause of death. Floyd Damron, 72 years old, 28 years on death row. Damron broke into the RGC Mineral Sands property and took equipment while claiming to a friend that there was some more of that nice stuff down there that he wanted to get. After enjoying some beer with pals a few weeks later on May 1, 1994, Damron and Jeff Chittum went back to steal more machinery. The two broke into the maintenance barn's electrical shop. Employee Don Miller found Chittum, but Damron snuck behind him and hit Miller with a steel pipe. Miller and Chittum begged Damron to save his life, but after pacing the floor, Damron bludgeoned Miller to death by beating him with the steel pipe 4 times on the body and 7 times on the head. The shift manager, Michael Knight, came into the building and yelled at Damron as he was dragging Miller's body across the floor. Damron had lived in Knight's area since he was a boy, so they were acquainted. Knight fled screaming from the building as Damron threatened him with the pipe. Damron was detained after Knight gave the police his identity. Several witnesses' claims that Damron told them false information about the murder served as additional proof connecting him to the crime. Additionally, the blood on Damron's clothes matched the blood on Miller. Damron had a long history of criminal activity at the time the murder occurred. Anthony Wainwright, 53 years old, 28 years on death row. Wainwright and Richard Hamilton broke out of a North Carolina jail, took a Cadillac and several weapons, and then fled to Florida. The car overheated at Lake City on April 27, 1994. At this point, they forced a young mother of 2 named Carmen Gayhart out of a Winn-Dixie parking lot and took her Ford Bronco. Gayhart was assayed, strangled, and shot twice in the back of the head by the 2 males. After a gunfight with the police on April 28, 1994, Wainwright and Hamilton were captured in Mississippi. Despite having AIDS, Wainwright confessed to assaying Gayhart after kidnapping and robbing her to the police after being apprehended. Wainwright denied any involvement in the victim's shooting and strangulation. Tony Davis, 53 years old, 28 years on death row. From September 1992 to December 1992, Tony Davis shared a home with Gwen Cunningham. On December 9, 1992, Gwen Cunningham left Davis to watch over her 2-year-old daughter Kalisha while she did errands. Thomas Moore, a friend of Davis, showed up at the flat around 12:45. Kalisha was slung over Davis's arm as he opened the door. Moore was informed by Davis that Kalisha had choked on a French fry and Davis revived her while Moore dialed 911. Davis's elevated voice and thumping sounds were heard coming from the apartment before the 911 call, according to the neighbors. When Kalisha was evaluated at the flat, she was wet, unresponsive, and had blood in her mouth. She was fully dressed when Gwen Cunningham left the apartment, but she was naked from the waist down when they found her. Kalisha was revived but passed away on December 10, 1992. In addition to injuries that showed SA, the emergency department doctor who examined Kalisha saw bruises, swelling of the brain, and pools of blood in the skull. 4 hits to the head resulted in cerebral bleeding, which was the cause of death. Kalisha's hair bow was discovered in the bed, and her blood was discovered on Davis's underpants, pillowcase, sheet, and in the bathroom. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.